All right, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, that was great. Thank you for that. My name is Scott Kinney with Discovery Education. It is my pleasure and honor to facilitate our conversation today with the incredible team from Baltimore County Public Schools and talk about their S.T.A.T initiative. And I'm not going to go into any more detail because I'll ask them to explain it. I know you want to hear from them, so I'm going to very briefly give a quick introduction in the form of a personal story. And so last fall, I had the incredible opportunity to visit Halstead Academy, which is an elementary school in Baltimore County. And during that visit, Dr. Dance and his administrative team gave a very nice welcome and an overview of the program. And then their principal, Jennifer Mullinex, came in and gave us a quick overview, handed us a floor chart of the district, and said, now go visit whatever classroom you'd like, talk to the kids, talk to the teachers. And the only thing we ask is you don't take any photographs if a student has a dot on them. And I thought, wow, that was pretty unique because in my time at Discovery, I've had the great fortune of traveling around the world and visiting some incredible schools around the world. But one of the things that I saw when I was in Baltimore County last October was incredible instruction in every classroom I walked into. And so much that in 10 years in this job, I literally walked out. I called some colleagues of mine. I called our CEO. I called my wife. And I said, I've just seen some of the best instruction I've ever seen in my life in Baltimore County Public Schools. And so it is a great honor for me to take a small part in sharing that story with you today. And so their biographies are in your programs. You can look them up. But I'm going to do kind of name and a rank, if you will, from left to right real quickly, and then we'll get right to the questions. So to my left, we have Superintendent of Baltimore County Public Schools, Dallas Dance. Please welcome Dr. Dance. The Chief Academic Officer, Verletta White. The guy with the job title I have always wanted since I was a child, the Executive Director of Innovative Learning, Ryan Imbriale. We have the principal, Steve Coco, of Mays Chapel Elementary School. So, Steve, welcome. And the bravest person in the room, no matter what your job is, where you come from, or if you're in the financial sector, in the educational sector, Andrea Bishop is a second grade teacher in Baltimore County. So please welcome Andrea. So I have some questions that I prepared. Certainly, we're going to throw it out to the audience in a little bit. So think of some things that you'd like to ask the panelists as well. But we'll go ahead and get started with Dr. Dance. Dallas, S.T.A.T, you're incredibly passionate about it. Tell us what it is, why you're passionate about it, why it's the right thing for your community.
Absolutely. So S.T.A.T for me is very personal. And I think for all of us who are parents in the room, you really want your child to have the same education that's what you would want for every other kid, right? And so everyone within this room right now, our kids have access to information, access to opportunity. And I really believe that in order for us to eliminate the achievement gap, then we have to leverage technology in order to be able to do so. I was very fortunate. I followed a superintendent in Baltimore County who had been there for 12 years. And a very sound strategic plan had been in place. But when I got there in 2012, it was about how do you accelerate the raising of the bar for every single kid and totally eliminate the achievement gap. And so through that, and all of this information is available online, Blueprint 2.0, which is our strategic plan, is really driven by a theory of action that is grounded in equity, making sure that every single kid gets exactly whatever he or she needs at the moment. And this is really where you customize a learning experience for them. Think outside of math, outside of science, ELA, or history. What's the learning experience we want for young people? And leveraging technology to do that in a one-to-one environment and allowing that same kid to have access to learning a second language prior to graduation. And S.T.A.T was our way of branding our one-to-one digital conversion. S.T.A.T came from kids. And it's called Students and Teachers Accessing Tomorrow, because really kids really believed that it was something that they wanted right now. It was immediate. However, at the same time, we knew we wanted to be very strategic and very deliberate in the implementation. And so I'm excited because, I've been there for 4 years now. 3 years we've been doing this work. Literally everyone on this stage is brand new in their position over that last 4 years. Verletta was in charge of elementary schools when I got there. Ryan was a principal. Steve was a principal in another school, and he opened up a brand new building for us. And Andrea has been doing some dynamic work now around personalizing, customizing learning for kids. So that's STAT. I am excited because the strategic plan that all of us as leaders want to see for our community, we're now starting to see it in action every single day.
That's great. So Ryan, I was going to ask you to kind of lay out the timeline of STAT and what it looks like. But before I do that, Verletta, you said something to me earlier about, it just doesn't start this day. Any strategic plan has a lot of planning and prep that goes into that. Could you talk a little bit about what was that lead up before you even initiated the STAT program?
Absolutely. The planning piece is essential. So a few years ago, as the superintendent mentioned, we had a real opportunity. We had new standards that were upon us. We had a new teacher evaluation system through the state. We also had a new assessment on the horizon. So when the superintendent went out and engaged the community members, they also told us what they wanted in a globally competitive graduate. So with that information and then thinking about what was at hand, we knew we had an opportunity to plan appropriately. So in that planning came discussions about what do we want that globally competitive graduate to look like? What do we want our students to know and to be able to do? What then do our teachers need to know and to be able to do? And then what are our foundational beliefs about curriculum? So with that, we had to think through, then how do we plan and operationalize that? We put that together in what we call a teaching and learning framework in Baltimore County. And that teaching and learning framework has become our anchor. It has become our instructional anchor, regardless of the initiative or regardless of what it is that we have in front of us. We know that we have to anchor our work in those P21 skills that are a part of our framework. That's what our parents and teachers and community members told us, that they want their students to be engaged. They want those learning and innovation skills. They want students to be able to have those life and career skills as well as the technology and the core knowledge. But then our teachers need to operationalize that in the planning and implementation, what that instruction looks like, what their classroom environment looks like as well. And we know that we want our curriculum to be responsive and accessible and relevant. So when we put all of those pieces together, they overlap naturally. And so we put that together in our framework, which has become our anchor for planning and for implementation as well.
Excellent. So Ryan, then take us to the plan. What does that STAT initiative look like over time?
So we had to figure out how to operationalize our strategic plan. And what we really spent a lot of time doing is thinking about what are the big buckets? What are the pieces that when you think about the work that we needed to do would come together to really guide the strategic work of the district? And so we have 8 conversions that we talk about all the time. We talk about curriculum, instruction, assessment. We talk about organizational development. We talk about budget, infrastructure, policy, and then the last communication is communication. And those 8 conversions guide the work that we do and how we move our work forward. Each one of those conversions have subcommittees that work underneath them. One of the most important things that we did early on was ensure that the committee structure around our 8 conversions wasn't divided by office or department, that it was truly across the district. And so when we're talking about something like organizational development, it involves everybody across the organization thinking about what are the things that have to happen to move the district forward. And then we looked at those 8 conversions and said, how do we begin this process? Where do we lay our foundation and move forward? And for us, it really started with our youngest learners, looking at our elementary schools, thinking about how we were going to move from those young learners and push the work forward into our middle schools, and then next year launching into 3 high schools through what we call our Lighthouse program. And Steve and the folks at Mays Chapel are one of our Lighthouse schools.
Was there ever a question where you started? Was it always, in your mind, elementary, or did some people come in and say, why not high school because of the first ones out? I mean,
well, so I'll speak to you as a constituent. I have 4 daughters, and I look at it from the place that as a parent in the system. And as a parent in the system, I really felt like it was important to think about the work from our youngest learner standpoint and how that would look as we moved up. We had lots of conversations. I know the superintendent had lots of conversations about this.
I heard him snicker over here, so I'm guessing it was a question at some point.
And we also, I think it's important to understand that we say this all the time. We're not in this work alone. We've learned from other school districts around this country who've done amazing work in this space. And how were they transforming teaching and learning? What were their lessons learned? And then thinking about how we could operationalize that. What were the needs of Baltimore County to move the work forward?
So, you wanted to add something?
No, I think it was a spirited debate about where do we begin. All my experience, of course, has been at the high school level, middle school level. Ryan was a high school principal. Most superintendents always think high school because that's our academic indicators which drive our evaluation. Also, you start to think about the average tenure of our school superintendent, and I think we made the best decision starting with our earliest learners. I think when I talk to me and my colleagues now across the country, in terms of achievement gaps, we know it starts way before kids come to school, but then you really build a system to where kids are driving the change throughout the organization. And so we as adults didn't have to catch up and adapt, but it was a very spirited debate, but I think that was probably one of the best decisions we made.
One of the important things, Scott, is, and Verletta could talk about this, is we always talk about leading with curriculum. So the other important thing was we weren't going to go into middle schools or into high schools if we hadn't done the upfront curriculum work that was necessary to really transform teaching and learning.
Right. That curriculum work was essential. Again, you can't utilize the tools if those tools aren't ready and if they're not available to you. So we had to start with curriculum, and we also had to start with professional development, changing mindset and shifting in that way. So curriculum had to begin early, and especially in our primary grades.
So each of you has touched on this idea of communication and stakeholders, and I want to come back to that. But Steve, I want to get to you and Andrea. At the elementary level, your school is 2 years old now. It was a new school. Mm-hmm. Steve, from your perspective, how did you prepare your instructional staff for, I think what you're asking is a different way to engage students in their instructional?
Right. So Dr. Dance has always made very clear from the very beginning that the work that we're doing is all about people. And so that resonated with me, and it's very powerful. It was very powerful in driving my approach to leading this change that we were about to embark on. We are or have created learner-centered environments for our students in the truest sense of meeting kids where they are. So we've taken the same approach, and it's with our staff and systemically as well for our teachers, for us. It's about meeting our people where they are to move them forward. So essentially, we've created a fail-forward culture. At least that's how I term it in our school, where because there is a lot of change that came along with this, and but it was okay to have something not work perfectly the first time, and so we actually took those opportunities to learn something from it, celebrate it, move forward, and talk about, okay, this was in the best interest of students and kids. How are we going to refine it and make it better if it didn't work? And so we also created an environment where we weren't afraid to share or express our vulnerabilities. We all rolled up our sleeves together to get involved with this work. And as we shared before, we've always made it about the instruction, curriculum and instruction, and that's right in a teacher's wheelhouse, to put simply. And so, when you talk about instruction, when you talk about assessment and children, teachers at heart want to do the best for their students. So, what it came down to was conversations about, okay, well, so what's the best tool to use to create an environment where we can truly meet all students' needs? What is the and from a professional development standpoint, what do we need to leverage in order to meet the adult needs within the building as well? So it's had us reshape and rethink professional development in the way that we look at the way that we're meeting our teachers' needs as well, because they're very diverse in their needs. And so this culture, this learner-centered environment has been all about people and creating success for them.
Yeah. Now, Steve, you might be on this stage because you are an incredible principal who's forward-leaning and kind of ready to make this move. Maybe you had colleagues that weren't as ready as you are, maybe still incredible principals, but maybe not as ready. Did you see that, and what were some of their hesitations, and how did you collectively as an organization get them ready and to the place where you are?
Right. Well, it was, I think, in the beginning, we had questions about what this would look like. We were, it wasn't so much a hesitancy as it was, well, how are we going to leverage this this technology, this pedagogy to meet the needs of all students. We had the opportunity to experience an environment where technology was used in such a way And then the planning portion went behind all of this was critical, the 18 to 20 months prior to this being rolled out into the school system. And so we leveraged our experiences to address any concerns that may have been, that may have existed among our peers or colleagues as well.
Yeah, Brian?
I was just going to add one of the things that we've done with Steve and our other principals who are involved in our Lighthouse work as early adopters is they actually lead cohorts of our other principals in this work. So Steve is able to share his experiences with a cohort of principals who are just a half step behind in terms of where they are with their buildings. And he's able to provide that coaching and that mentoring in a way that helps them understand the challenges. And all of our Lighthouse schools also open their doors. So we are always having our schools have the opportunity to see what it looks like in operation.
And along those lines, I would also say that because our Lighthouse schools serve as learning labs, when teachers have an opportunity to come in and talk to other teachers, and when our principals have a chance to speak with one another, they're able to speak candidly about what's working and what doesn't work so well and how we can make some adjustments. And I think that that really helps. So those in the beginning who may have been a little hesitant were able to, in the beginning, before they had a chance to really adopt this new transformation, had that opportunity to have those conversations. But again, that went back, that was part of our planning all along to design it in the way that they could be true learning labs for instruction.
That's great. So, Andrea, let's talk about the second graders who walk in your classroom. How is it different for them today than it was? I mean, you taught at another school outside the S.T.A.T initiative at one point. So how is it different for them today than it was before?
I think that it's different because there are just so many more digital resources and tools available to me as their teacher and also to them as they choose their own learning pathway. There's everything that they need to meet the needs of, that I can use to meet the needs of all of my learners and to personalize and their learning and make it more rigorous and tailored to what those students need. I've seen a huge increase in student engagement there because they're able to choose how they want to learn, what they want to learn, and also how they want to present their learning and share their thinking, that with all that choice, that they're just so much more engaged in their own learning. They're able to be more collaborative with one another using all these online collaboration tools that we're using in our classroom on a daily basis. They can create the discussions. They can ask their classmates questions and kind of get their own learning, what they're interested in and what they're curious about. Along with that, I think the biggest change for me has been how I'm able to differentiate my instruction for my students. And I think as teachers, we always know that the best instruction is in a small group because you can't teach everyone the same thing at the same time because we have unique learners with individual needs. So that has stayed the same, our small group instruction. But thinking about the other students in the room, that's what's changed the most. What is everybody else doing while I'm with a small group? And those students are able to be more independent because maybe if they need more support reading, that now we have these recording tools where I can provide a recording so that I can repeat directions, or I can make a screencast or a video for the students to kind of reteach a concept that might have been confusing to them in the past. And they can look at that screencast as often as they want. They can take it home, share it with their parents, build that school-to-home connection, and they're just able to be more independent. But I also think along with thinking about their academic needs, I'm able to meet them personally because we created these dialogue journals, which is all online, and you can make it password protected so that it's a secret between, unless you have the password, you can't get into it. And the students use that digital platform to communicate with me on a daily basis about where there's confusion in any of my teaching and in their learning, and they're also able to share with me what's going on at home so that when they walk in the door every day, I know where they're coming from and I can meet their needs that day. So it's just been such a positive change.
Okay, I want a whole school just full of you. So how does a school system like Baltimore County, how do we just create that? How were you supported to get to the point that you just described? Because one of the things in the visit I did see, it wasn't whole class instruction. There was a lot of group work. The teacher was moving around. So how did you get to that place? And what were the supports that provided that?
I mean, Steve is such a wonderful principal because he just allows his teachers to do, he always says, do what your students need, meet their needs first. They're the most important. So we're able to be flexible with our instruction to meet their needs, but he also, a message that was relayed to all of the teachers as we went through this process was, it's okay to be where you are, but you need to keep moving forward and keep making progress at your own pace. So just knowing that, we're all coming from different areas of expertise, and that's okay, but if we keep taking steps in the right direction, that's what is expected.
That's great. Right.
So Steve mentioned people. So one of the things that we did very early on is ensure that every single one of our school buildings had an instructional coach. We call that person a STAT teacher. But that instructional coach is critical because that instructional coach in every one of our schoolhouses is able to customize and personalize the experience for the staff in that building to meet the unique needs that may exist at Mays Chapel, different than Halstead Academy. But at the same time, those STAT teachers in all of our schools also come out to get the kind of professional development and systemic PD that they need from the system to move the work around transforming teaching and learning forward. And so many of our school buildings have been able to really benefit from leveraging that connection between the administrative team, their needs, the system needs, and the needs of the individual teachers in the classroom through the instructional coach model.
Fantastic. Andrea, how about parents? I mean, how are they reacting to this?
I think the parents have been really supportive at first. They were a little cautious about all the new things that we were doing. Are my kids going to just be playing games on the devices? How are they using the devices, and how are you using them to teach my children? And once we kind of explained what they're using it for, that everything they're doing on the device is meaningful, even when they're independent, and with Steve's message that we're doing everything to meet the needs of your kids, they've just been more accepting. And now I think I have students and parents tell me all the time, I wouldn't want my kid at any other school. I'm so happy that you opened this school and that we're here. And I've just seen so much positive response.
That's great. Well, one of the things, so I have one line of questioning, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. One of the things that has been so impressive about your initiative is that how well it's been communicated to your stakeholders. So talk a little bit about why that's so important. Who are those stakeholders, and what were some of the challenges there? Because I can't imagine everybody just agreed right up front. So Dallas, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So I'll answer that in sort of two parts. The first one is when we developed that strategic plan, and every superintendent in the room knows that very first year and that transition year, we held well over 200 community meetings. I met with well over 2,000 people, and what everyone kept talking about were the inequities within the district. People knew it, but it was just something people did not talk about until a new superintendent came in and I started pushing on people. And it boiled down to folks kept talking about the inequities that existed with technology and that they believe access needed to be given around the district. Now from that, plan was developed, and so I think what our community now starts to see is we're implementing what we said we wanted to do as a community. It's not the superintendent's plan, it's now our plan as a community. But one of the things we learned early on, and folks always ask me, what's a mistake that you guys made, is we only started with 7 conversions. Communication was not a conversion for us because we automatically just assumed, we're just doing the work, right? But we recognized that unless we communicated the message, not just to our internal stakeholders, but also to our community, giving them frequent updates of what was going on, and not just internally meaning our staff, but really our students too. Everyone needs to know and be on the same page what we were doing. We quickly added that. And this is when I will say, when we are as superintendents thinking about people whom we do business with, we start thinking of them as thought providers with us. And so one of the things we were able to do with Discovery is we said, we need to now invite parents in to see what their kids are doing during the day. And so from that, we now hold nights of innovation, where in our lighthouse schools, we bring our parents in. Adults don't even really talk. There's students on display saying, this is what I'm doing in class, and parents now have to do some of the stations that kids are in fact doing. But we communicate frequently, often, in real time. There is a blog that we have now for our lighthouse schools. Our website's been completely redesigned to make sure that folks really understand what we're doing. quarterly, I send messages to our students. I frequently send messages to our staff. We frequently do Connect Ed messages to our community. We hold community breakfasts for folks. We do an annual State of the Schools, which has roughly 1,200 people who come and hear about some of the updates that we have going on as a school system. But it was really involving ourselves around a brand. And so and I'll end with this, when you go to our website, if you were to Google BCPS, more than likely you're going to come up with this slogan that says Team BCPS. And so it was about branding ourselves that whether you are an employee with us, if you do business with us, if you are an elected official, if you buy coffee in one of our 7-Elevens, then you are a member of our team and we want you to know what's going on. And so, we frequently communicate with you through Monday e-newsletters, but, I've never met a parent or a community member who say they just communicate too much. And so our goal is to make sure that you constantly and frequently know the information real time and really what's going on within our district.
That's fantastic. Steve, does that trickle down all the way through to the building principal communicating with the parents and that?
And that's exactly what my line of thinking was as I'm hearing Dr. Dance talk and that question, because from the systemic level to have that high level of quality communication has really helped us at the school level, because the communication has not been a barrier. For us, it's about opening the doors and letting parents and the community know what's that really mean for my child? What's that really look like for my student? And when we, with our electronic platform that we utilize, which is known as BCPS One, our parents are able to access their child's curriculum. They're able to access their grades, 24/7. And so that level of communication and transparency has enabled us to accelerate this learning and this shift and transformation in teaching and learning. So it's been remarkable. And just having that, we've also taken other opportunities beyond Nights of Innovation, which were very effective. During traditional environments that we have, like back to school nights and American Education Week. Open our doors, celebrate, come in, look what we're doing. Look how school has changed since you were there. Even my language and conversations from even 4 or 5 years ago are completely different than they are now. It's just exciting.
That's great. Really.
Just another piece of that I think is critically important to know. The internal communication is also critically important. So one of the things that I found in speaking with my colleagues is that one of the things I think is unique about Baltimore County is that our business side of the house is very much connected to our instructional side. And so I think that type of communication is also important, because if not, you can have the business side running out with infrastructure and with facilities and designing all kinds of facilities kind of enhancements, and then you have curriculum kind of back here, where we're saying that instruction drives all of that communication and those decisions. That type of communication between and among offices within the organization has been a lesson learned and has been critically important to our communication process as well.
Ryan and then Steve.
And so I think the other critical piece to that as well is, not only the communication amongst the curriculum offices at a district level, but also the communication between schools and curriculum offices has been unprecedented in recent years. Continually looking for feedback from teachers who are in front of their students every day, having the ability to adjust and modify and change curriculum in an online platform. Has just enabled us to accelerate the learning process for everyone along the way. So it goes back and forth across every direction.
Great. Right.
I was just going to say, whether it's internal or external, if you don't tell your story, somebody else will.
That's absolutely true. All right, let's go ahead and open up to the audience. If you could just give me your name, where you're from, and please, please, please make it a question. So right there, and then I'll probably repeat it just for the mic.
All right. My name is Jerichus. I'm a grad student at UPenn. My question is around your professional development for your initiative, because a lot of times we get these new fancy digital platforms, and our teachers and our staff members are not adequately trained to actually to be able to use it effectively. So what was your professional development like to make this program work?
So the question was, what was the professional development like to make this program work? Great question.
So professional development really runs the gamut, and touches each of our stakeholders as well. So when we're talking about how to make sure that there's a general understanding of how to transform teaching and learning, our curriculum is written by our teachers for our teachers. So it's critically important for our curriculum writers to have professional development, the STAT teachers that Ryan mentioned, who meet monthly so they can have adequate professional development. But then we also have a teacher leader corps that serves as a hub of professional development within every building, so that what teachers have someone to go to. And it's not just one person, but that principal is then able to build capacity within the building. So we're looking at professional development for our principals as well. That happens on a monthly basis, so that it all centers around, like I said before, that teaching and learning framework that anchors our work. What do those P21 skills look like? Then what does that look like in the shift in the classroom environment? So we have seen, and we're realizing the shifts in the environment. The desks, the tables, the chairs, all of that looks differently because of the new learning that is occurring throughout the organization.
To continue what Verletta was saying, one of the other things that we tried to do is understand that this is a change, and it's about change. And so we also did professional learning with our administrators around the change process. And so when you think about the work of like Bridges, for example, really thinking about what it means to lead through transition. And so you can't get to that transformation of teaching and learning without understanding that process. And so we worked through that. We spent a lot of time focusing on that. The other thing is we understood that everybody learns in different ways and at a different pace. And so we did our best to understand that, and understand that we would take steps backwards and think about the way we were providing professional development, and then think about it moving forward. How do we ensure that the resources are in the right place at the right time to ensure that our teachers were taking that next step forward, understanding that as a team, the second grade team at Mays Chapel may look different than the third grade team at Mays Chapel. But that's okay as long as we're taking those steps forward and ensuring that incremental progress. From a professional development standpoint, we constantly are checking ourselves and looking at where we are in the process. How do we adjust? When we went from elementary school to expand to the middle schools and into our secondary schools, that's a big change. And at the secondary, and from a secondary instructional standpoint, there's a big shift there that is occurring. And so there's additional steps that needed to be taken in that frame of mind.
Andrea, anything from your perspective?
I think for many of the teachers around the county that we had 10 lighthouse schools, so we were the first to get our devices and to implement this change and to make this shift, that we had visits at our school very often on a weekly basis where teachers and groups from different schools were able to come in and see it in action. So it wasn't just like they were hearing a presentation about what it was going to be like, and they were actually diving in with us, talking to our students, talking to the people in our school about what we were doing, what it's like to now have all these resources available, and most importantly, they were seeing what the children were learning and how they were learning.
Great. Gentlemen, I saw right there.
Hi, I'm Jim Hagan. I'm from Baltimore City, actually, so I picked up little bits and pieces of what you're talking about. So I have a little bit of a leading question, actually. I was interested in how you're using data kind of across the whole chain. So coming from the classroom all the way up to the district level, how are you using data, and which metrics are important internally for tracking your progress, as well as which metrics are you communicating outward to communicate your progress to the community?
Yeah, great question. So the question was about the use of data. What's important, how are you using it internally, and what are you communicating externally?
I think one of the important decisions that we made early on was to have an outside evaluator and to have that type of an objective point of view on what's working and what isn't working, and using those metrics that the outside evaluator uses to determine our effectiveness. So professional development is part of that evaluation. We have a logic model that looks at changing teacher behavior and then eventually getting to the point where we'll look at student achievement and data. But first, changing that mindset, looking at the effectiveness of professional development, looking at the change in classroom environment, all goes into those metrics of what we're looking for initially, the effectiveness of the STAT teacher, and looking at perceptions of teachers as well. So yes, we do have qualitative and quantitative measures that are part of that logic model to get us to those adjustments that we need to make along the way. One of the things that we've learned from that is that higher order questioning, higher order thinking skills, we've done a better job now. That's one of the first things that we learned going into and hearing back from our external evaluator that our teachers needed more professional development on. So then we were able to take that information and make those adjustments for professional development so that now we're seeing an increase in that. So those are some of the kinds of things that go into that logic model in our evaluation overall.
From a funding perspective, I mean, the folks who control the purse strings, if you will, because this is still, there are funds that go along with this initiative. What are they looking for? I mean, is it the Hopkins study, or what are they, is that a tough one? But what are they looking for as a measure of success to continue this initiative?
Sure, and I don't know if I'd say it's a tough one. I think it just depends on which stakeholder you're asking, right? So I always, again, go back to the initial onset of developing the plan. And the community as a group, we said this was something that we in fact want to do. When we also think through our convergence, we know that budget is a big part of it. This costs money. I also recognize the fact that I have a $1.7 billion budget, and while 85% of it's people, it's still a little bit of discretion around what we're using our dollars based on. So one thing immediately coming in is I kept asking, how many programs do we use in this district? Not many people could answer that, right? So we actually tasked research and accountability, and as a superintendent wanting to really drive the organization based on results, I actually put more resources into accountability. We then came up with almost 500 programs in the district we were using. And I kept asking, what's the academic return on each investment that we're doing? Because I could look at that point, and I know my budget probably better than my budget people, or just as well as they know. I could give them and say, how much are we spending per student based on the results that we're getting with X program? And doing a side-by-side analysis of that, we're now down to less than 200 programs we're using within the district. We're then able to reallocate those dollars to initiatives that we know really, really matter. We then started asking ourselves, do we have the right people in place in order to carry out our initiative? So there were some central positions that we know we had to look at, right? We went line by line within that budget, even asking ourselves, how do we procure devices? Because I would have principals, one on the stage, and you probably can guess which one, who really wanted to make great decisions for their kids and really was saying, we want broadband in our schools, so we want to get it. So I would have PTAs going out putting routers in schools, or principals going to some type of store to get routers for their schools. And we kept saying, guys, these are things that we should be doing, but unless we go line by line, look at our procurement practices by wholesale, and then buy direct and buy in bulk for the system, we can do this. So yeah, we went through a conversation of, should every single school lease its own printers and copiers? Or is that something that central-wide, we have a conversation around print management, and we move to that? At the end of the day, then we were able to go to our funding authorities, and my budget comes entirely from the state and from the county. And we were able to go to them and say, this is what we want to do, but this is what we've done internally to redirect funds in order to pay for it, and this is ultimately what it would cost if you were to commit to doing this with us. We're very, very fortunate, and our county executive just rolled out his budget last week, that they're funding our initiatives, meaning they're funding S.T.A.T, they're funding our passport program, which is where our elementary kids are learning a second language prior to graduation, because they're also seeing that our two big initiatives have third-party evaluators giving us feedback based on it. So the Center for Applied Linguistics, they analyze and evaluate our passport program. Johns Hopkins Center for Reform and Education is analyzing our STAT initiative. And we're taking those data points we get, we're informing our board, we're making those public, and then we're actually adjusting our practices based on that.
Is that a no-brainer? I mean, anybody going through this process, should they hire an outside evaluator?
I think if you go back to Ryan's point around change management, and this is when I go back, and I'm probably one of the biggest reflectors. You go back and think about the groundwork that was laid in that first 1 to 2 years. It was really understanding that people want, they want to do what's right for kids. They understand that change is important, that change is going to happen. But you also got to recognize that if you don't really address the culture around what is change and how might change be impacting an organization, it's going to eat your strategy up. And so coming into Baltimore County, you know, it was very, very clear, and I was told this, you know, you're going into a really, really good school system. I was told by a colleague who told me, you can really stay there 12 to 15 years if you do absolutely nothing, just maintain the system. The community did not want that. The community was asking, what's the next level of academic excellence for our school system? But I knew that in order to make it happen, then we had to make folks aware of what we were trying to do, why we wanted to do it, meet people where they are, and build a culture that, you know what, this is not about an I got you, but we all have to move forward. So yeah, this was the superintendent sitting in a principal's meeting saying, I don't know how we're going to get there. I know that at the end of the day, we're going to get there. And that was quite different, and it's quite different from most organizations because people don't get that type of leadership. So investing in principals, investing in people who are in different positions within the organization, I think that was really what drove to where we are today.
And just to be clear, before Ryan's current role, he was a principal?
Ryan was a principal. Even if you think about my senior, again, Ryan was the principal I was talking about. But even if you think about my senior staff, the direct report, yes, it definitely wasn't Steve. Even if you think about the direct reports to me within the organization, everybody is either in a different position or they're being utilized differently within that role. So we all had to let our guards down to say, if we don't model the culture of risk-taking, the culture of innovation, of team building, we can't expect our schools to do that.
Excellent. Another question? Yes, sir.
My name is Charles Hoppe. I'm from Ohio State University.
That was good. It was a good thing.
Could you talk a little bit about the instructional resources and how that has changed with this process? You know, everything from are you going away from buying in core products and going more down to lessons, apps, games, how that's working, and the relation between OER, self-developed and in-house developed and purchased resources.
So just to be clear, let me repeat that. Your instructional materials, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is around instructional materials. What's the balance? Is there one core versus many supplemental? What's the balance between OER and self-created, so on and so forth?
How has it changed in this program?
So it's really all of the above in terms of an organization our size. When you look at all the different academic areas and the way we're providing those resources depending on the level, depending on the need. The one thing that I would say that was critical in the work that we did is creating that digital ecosystem. So when we began this work, Dr. Dance mentioned how had all of these different programs all over the place. As a superintendent, sorry, Dr. Dance. As a principal in the system, I had multiple usernames and passwords. I had so many different ways. I kept them in my wallet. So if you stole my wallet, you knew everything because there was just so many different things you had to get into. Steve would probably echo that. So what we did early on is say, we need one place you go, one door you enter, and then what's inside that door and what does it look like inside there, we've been continually growing and creating over the last 3 years. And so our digital ecosystem is BCPS 1. BCPS 1 is continuously growing. It's not complete right now, but inside there, what we can tell you is the resources and information in there, whether it's OER or whether it's resources that we're licensing, is vetted, is connected to our curriculum, and is provided in multiple pathways. In Discovery's example, whether it's through digital content where you can go right into Discovery streaming resources, or in our LMS, you can reach the same resources through a federated search. So providing those multiple pathways for students, teachers, for our parents as well, depending on the resources, was critical as we looked at the landscape. So the huge change for us really was the digital ecosystem.
So, Andrea, how do you manage that from a teacher's perspective? And so if there's not one book anymore that you're going to kind of leaf throughout the year, and you have all these resources that you're managing now through BCPS 1, how do you manage that process?
I think, first of all, it's really nice having everything in the same place, but at first it was intimidating having all of these new resources available to us, things that I've never used before the past 2 years. And I just kind of took it 1 week at a time. I told myself that I was going to learn one new tool each week and try to use it if it could enhance my instruction. So that was my goal, just use one new thing a week.
I mean, Dallas, I want to go back to something you said earlier, and you talked about equity and the importance of equity. And some people would argue that when a district undergoes a one-to-one or a digital initiative, that you can actually, make that gap wider, right? So there's the homework gap that the FCC talks about, or some folks in the FCC. From your perspective, how are you managing that equity piece and making sure that there's an accessibility across the district?
Sure. So I think for our community, they now see that we're implementing what we say we're going to do. The story you just gave around Halstead, I put my own child in Halstead in a heartbeat. Halstead, though, what folks don't know is less than 5 years ago, folks did not want to send their kid to that school. And so we've been able to leverage technology to accelerate, kids in various forms. We've been able to use technology to bring the community together. Because Jennifer will tell you, she has parents who come into her school because they want to know more around technology, but they want access themselves. Halstead was most recently featured in My Brother's Keeper, where a documentary that was put on by the White House, and really what parents talked about in that documentary is, I'm learning through him because I don't have access and didn't have access to computers myself. I do believe that we have a fundamental responsibility, and I'm glad the FCC took action, and Commissioner Rosenworcel has been really, really good on this one. We've got to make sure that while kids are connected during the day at school, that we continue our efforts around making sure they're connected at home. And so I'm very fortunate in Baltimore County, we have an education foundation. It's led by Debbie Phelps. You might know her. She has a little bit of a famous son, right? But she's done an amazing job in just bringing awareness to the community around what we're looking to do. And what we've had discussions about is how do we work with some of our other thought providers in making sure that we can provide scholarships to families for home internet access as well. So that as kids are doing work and they're getting engaged and getting connected during the day, they don't lose that at home. I still think about the number of snow days that we miss and the number of instruction and the amount of instruction that we miss. How can we bridge what's happening at school with home? And we got to do it through connectivity.
Verletta, you're one of the smartest CAOs I know in the country. When I walk into Halstead Academy, I was blown away. When you walk into one of your schools that's going through this initiative, what are your look-fors? What are the metrics of success that you see that you think to yourself, we've got it here, or we're on the right path?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whenever I look for effective instruction, we want to make sure that the learning is enduring. The students know what they're learning. They know why they're learning, what they're learning. They also are engaged, and that there is some element of explicit instruction, maybe through small group instruction. We know that teachers have that flexibility between whole group and small group, but we know that there's a direct connection throughout that teaching as well when I have that face-to-face connection. Help also has to feel like help. So that as Andrea stated, that as a teacher and I have a small group in front of me, do I have an opportunity to reach my students when they're not with me, when they're engaging in instruction using the tools that are available to them, and it's not just a sit and get or just some activity that they're engaged in, but it's one that's a learning activity for them. So there's some explicit instruction, there's also that engagement, and there's an ongoing assessment, evaluation of how kids are learning. We're teaching to the eyes as well to say, are you really getting it? And do you see, can you explain to me what's happening? And if I can't see your eyes, do I have information based on the tools that I have available to me to know whether or not you're actually learning? So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for, that enduring learning, the explicit instruction, the engagement and evaluation as well.
Great. Dallas, I want to give you the last word. What's next? What's the future of STAT look like? What's the future of Baltimore County look like?
I think we have to continue having conversations and ground ourselves in equity. And this is when it gets really, really hard, because equity conversations around race, around socioeconomic status, around gender, those are conversations that traditionally we've shied away from. Right? And I think we can bridge it together by continuing our work around STAT, making sure that it gets in every single school, but also we bring our community along at the same time to get them to understand that if we don't have these conversations now, then our community in 10, 15, 20 years will not be able to thrive. Because we're starting to see where we're leveling the playing field now, where we're doing it in our lighthouse schools, but I also recognize that we have 175 schools that we have to do this. And then also making sure that you continue investing and building capacity in your people. Because at the end of the day, it's no program that's going to get us there. It's leadership succession. It's making sure that teachers feel like they're supported and that they can take risks, because it's not about an evaluation. It's about all of us growing to continue moving the work forward. So the next step of that is really just making sure that we support each other throughout the work, and that's why you didn't hear from me much in this. I'm so very, very fortunate as a superintendent that we have a team of folks who are doing the work now, and that we're building capacity in people so that, Verletta's going to be a superintendent one day. I'm going to make her be a superintendent one day. But that we have people in the organization who can move into that position and take STAT to the next level.
Please join me in thanking the incredible team of Baltimore County Public Schools.